Hi there everyone! Welcome back to the table once more. And I know I've been changing my uploading schedule just a little bit. Like I said, it's been a little bit hectic in the household right now, and having started looking at some of the footage from Cousins Night, I really want to make sure that I put that video together because that's going to be probably the most unusual video I've ever put out on this channel so far, so I want to make sure that I get that done right. But I promise you, we'll be back to board games as usual in the coming days, in the coming weeks for sure. I know that I still need to get King of Tokyo done up. We are going to be starting Innovation very, very shortly, but Cousins Night is taking up a lot more time than I wanted it to, but I want to make sure that I put a good quality video out for you guys, so I'm going to make sure to do that one right. So what I'd like to do today is another one of my table topics. So, in light of recent events, what I've decided to do is sort of change the tone. I had a different topic lined up for today's table topics, but I decided to switch it up and do something that's probably a little bit divisive among board game players out there. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but in my opinion, I think I'm touching on a subject that is fairly polarizing out there in the gaming world, and that is party games. That's right, these overly simplified, straight-to-it board games where that can accommodate more than the standard 4 to 6 players. So we're looking at games like Cards Against Humanity, Billionaire Banshee, Telestrations, Laugh and Lose, and a plethora of other games in general. And what I'm going to try to do today is sort of a pro-con analysis of why I think that party games are good, but they're not great. They're not my go-to when I look at a new game to invest in. I usually pass these by. So let's take a look at some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses of what I would consider, anyway, of party games. So right out of the gate, I'm going to start off with that they're easy to learn and easy to play. And that is amazing. That is also very important when you're looking at party games in general. It's important to have a game that players can jump into very quickly and make sure that they're not spending a lot of time reading and rereading the rulebook to make sure they're playing it right. A lot of deep strategy games that I'll be touching on later on in the channel require often 1 to 2, if not maybe 3 or 4 different read-throughs of the game manual to make sure that you're playing it right with all of the different mechanics that are in play. You pick up one of these party games, and within a couple of minutes, you're pretty much off to the races. For example, let's look at Laugh and Lose, a game that we played on Cousins Night that I will be doing a sort of a tutorial gameplay video on as part of the Cousins Night special that's coming up very shortly. This game is very simple. You divide players into 2 teams, and you read jokes to each other. The first one to laugh loses. Right? Pretty straightforward. Takes a couple of seconds. First one, you grab 20 cards, and first one to, get more points than the other team, wins. Pretty straightforward. Most of these games are about accumulating points, more points than other players or other teams. It levels the playing field, and that means that nobody feels that they're at a disadvantage or an advantage over other players. Because these games don't have a lot of mechanics to them and a lot of deep strategy involved, a lot of players can just jump in for the first time and not feel like they're a step behind other players who have maybe played this before. But that also brings me to the first con of party games, and that is, ironically, that they're easy to learn. So as I mentioned several times in the previous point, that party games don't have a lot of strategy to them. They're pretty straightforward. You read the rules once, maybe a second time around just to make sure that there's no variant styles to play, and you can jump right in. However, for players such as myself that enjoy more deep strategy games, you might feel like you're lacking in some substance. So games that are easy to play and easy to learn aren't overly complicated. It can remove a lot of the strategy involved in winning, because a lot of it is left to chance. Now, chance to me is players winning without effort. usually by some arbitrary decision from a judge or some arbitrary game mechanic that means, like, again, I will use laugh and lose as the example, that you get a point if you make somebody else laugh. If you laugh, then you obviously lose the point, as the name of the game suggests. But that's it. That's all there is to it. So it's a chance that a player might laugh or not. That's a risk that you take in playing a game like this. That's all there is to strategy. There's no other nuances or mechanics that you can employ to try to win or to beat out your opponent. It's just make them laugh. And that's it. So some players may feel like there's not enough to keep them going back to games like this, which I guess is fine considering that party games are really only meant to be played periodically and not all the time. So following that, I'd like to touch on my next point of why I think party games are good. Crazy card combinations mixed with weird game mechanics such as pie in the face and speak out, but they can really be the life of the party, putting players in awkward, strange situations, using strange devices, or putting them in perilous predicaments that ultimately lead into them losing points or gaining points depending on how the object of the game plays out. And another great point of that is that when you're playing with new players, you get to see a whole slew of different combinations that you've never seen before. But you play with the right people and you get the right card combinations, suddenly it makes you fall in love with these games all over again. So they can really brighten up the party if you've got the right game. More importantly, the right mindset of people playing them. These games also allow you to combine things differently and to play them differently. They usually have a couple of variant styles in which to play. I know, for example, Billionaire Banshee, which I'll begin again touching on later on, has 3 different ways that you can play it. Or you can do something crazier. Rather than go out and buy Telestrations After Dark, why don't you combine Telestrations and Cards Against Humanity using the white cards, and boom! Suddenly you've got a whole new way to play 2 different games that you already own. It may not work out in the end, but there's nothing saying you can't do it. But that also brings me to this problem. So despite the fact that these games are designed to create a lot of joy and laughter, sometimes that energy can stall out, and that leads to what I'd like to call Buzzkill. Now, Buzzkill usually happens when there's a series of card combinations or a series of cards in a stack that you reach to that really stalls out the fun. People aren't finding it very funny. We hit a particular point of that in Laugh and Lose, where the object of the game really is to not laugh. So I know the intention is like, you're not going to have an easy time not laughing at these jokes. Yeah, well, if you hit the wrong set of cards or you're playing with the wrong people, it's going to be pretty easy to not laugh at these. And that's through no fault of the game itself, that's just happen chance. You know, it just was the way the cards fell or the type of people that you're playing with. But when you hit a point like that, or you've played Cards Against Humanity time and time and time again, suddenly you start seeing combinations that you've seen before, and you go, I know, I've seen this before. And either it's still funny, which should be great, or it's not funny, and that kind of starts killing your evening if you see repetition. And this is sort of where, again, you're leaving it to chance, as I mentioned earlier, is based on arbitrary decisions by a third party, right? So a lot of winning these games is outside of your control. So if you are playing a game like Cards Against Humanity, let's say, and your card combinations just aren't being picked, although it's part of the game to argue why your choice is the best, ultimately that can leave a player feeling cheated and frustrated and probably not wanting to play again, because if they're not playing to the judge, then what's the point? So sort of my third and final point about why party games are good is the flexibility in the rules. So let's take Cards Against Humanity as an example. Players take 7 cards, and they try to make card combinations based on what black card is being drawn by the judge, and then try to make the most inappropriate combination available. Give the most inappropriate answers they can to score points. If the judge picks your card, then you get a point, and you usually play to 7 points and then the game is done. However, You can also play to 10 points. You can play to some other arbitrary designation of points. You can also include an invisible player called Rando Calrissian, where players will randomly choose cards from Rando, and if the judge picks Rando's card and Rando ultimately ends up winning the game, then everybody has to admit that they got beaten by an invisible player and that they suck at life. Alternatively, players can also discard any cards that they don't understand and have to admit to their ignorance, or they can just discard cards they don't like and not have to do anything at all. It really depends on the group that you're playing with and whose game it is and what kind of rules you're going to be strict on and which kind of rules you're not going to be strict on, which is great. Having that kind of flexibility means that it's a lot more accessible for everybody to play. But that also leads me to my third sort of con with party games. And that is, why have rules in general? If rules are either meant to be adjusted or broken or ignored, you can arbitrarily decide when the game is over. You can arbitrarily decide who wins based on no rules whatsoever. So really you're just given a stack of cards and just kind of like, here's a sort of framework, and then meld it to whatever makes sense with your group, which I guess is a good thing, but then why bother having rules and gameplay mechanics if you're just going to change them all the time? If you're not going to adhere to a very strict set of rules, then why bother having them? Games like Telestration can only really be played one way, unless you're adding in Cards Against Humanity, for example. Like, if the rules don't matter and the points don't matter, then why bother having them at all? Just have a game that you can have fun with, and there you go, done, boom, that's it. Now, some people like myself are a little bit more stringent on rules. That's again why I like the deep strategy games, because there's a set of rules and game mechanics that you can use and exploit to better advantage yourself over other players and win. But these games don't have that. These games don't have mechanics and gameplay that allow you to sort of tip the balance in your favor to come out on top. It really is, in some cases, how you sell your cards, how the card combinations land, or whether or not you're laughing at the jokes that are being told. Again, these kind of games are meant to accommodate a larger number of people beyond the 4 to 6 players that most board games accommodate. So, you know, games like King of Tokyo and Robo Rally, they can accommodate like 6 to almost 8 players, which is great. Billionaire Banshee can have up to 10. You know, Laugh and Lose can have up to 10. Cards Against Humanity can have almost an infinite number of players to play it, because there's enough cards there that everybody has a chance to participate. They make for great gifts. What better way to, you know, show up at Christmas and a Christmas gift, boom, here, Cards Against Humanity. Oh, hey, I've got Cards Against Humanity. Let's all play. And then suddenly you've got a little party game and a little party to pull it off with, which is great. But I just wouldn't go out of my way personally to invest in them. If you guys do, let me know in the comments below what some are your favorite party games. You know, do you prefer investing in party games? Do you like your more deep strategy games, solo games? Where's your comfort zone when it comes to gaming? Because again, I do the table topics as a discussion, as a question and answer sort of thing. So, all this to say that party games aren't awful. It's not a bad time, right?